Hi, in this video today we're going to be looking specifically at tracking data for the foundation stage, for the reception year. We're looking at this because we get asked quite a lot of questions about tracking this data, and that's because it's different. It's different to tracking for years 1 to 6. For a start, we've got 17 early learning goals. Schools are using different formats of assessment, different format of data, development matters, bands, sub-development matters, bands, and what have you. So we're going to look at the options in Insight. Now, as I said before, Insight's a really, really flexible system. So you have a lot of choice. You can customize the system. We can track against learning objectives, which I'm going to look at in a minute. You can track against a handful of key learning objectives, or a much bigger set of learning objectives if you like, or no learning objectives at all, and just make an overall summative judgment for the child. And that overall summative judgment might be against each of the early learning goals, or it might be just one very broad overarching judgment that says whether they're on track to meet GLD or not. So you can go from very, very detailed up to a very broad assessment, and it's entirely up to you. So let's have a look at the objective level data to start with. So if I just click on the objectives button here, and then let's go down here, and as you can see, I've got all of the early learning goals set up here. So let's just choose one of those, choose reading. And you'll see that we've got a grid here with names of children. They come in from your MIS system. We've got an overall assessment here, which I'll come back to in a minute. And then we've got these subcategories. We've got these development matters bands here with statements associated with them, which will be familiar to you. Now, they're split up by 22, 36, 30, 50, 40, 60. And if you were doing this, then you would make an assessment for each child against these statements. So if I click on one of these, you'll note that I've got some options here, 0, 1, 2, or 3, and you can see the language that's used there, objective secured, greater depth, and what have you. That actually might be more appropriate for years 1 to 6. You can change the language of those to suit you. But let's say that that one's secured. Now I can actually do a whole row if I want to, so I can make the whole row assessed or secure across the board. And if I want to just manually adjust some of them, select the row, select some particular children, and I can change those ones. So there we go. We've got metrics here to show of what's been assessed so far, what's the average score, and of what has been assessed so far, what percentage of them are secured. So that's quite a useful measure. Now, as I said, this is all split up by the development matters month bands with the individual statements within those. Now, that, if you add that up, that is a huge amount of objectives. That's a lot of assessments to make, to record in the system. When we've got 30 children and 30 statements, that's 900 assessments. But actually, we're talking about a lot more than this, and you'd be doing this across a year. So it could add up to thousands. And schools, rightly so, will be thinking about the workload impact, whether this is sustainable, and perhaps this should be trimmed down. So your options are, well, the options are don't track against any learning objectives at all, just make an overall summative judgment, as we have up here. Or maybe just track against statements for particular early learning goals. So here we've got all 17, but it might just be that you want reading, writing, and number. It might be that you just want to have some key objectives, and as you can see, I've got one highlighted in bold here, which is a key objective, and you might just want to have those. Now, in the system, in the admin system, here we've got this manage objectives tool, and in there you've got complete control over the statements that you assess against. So you could go in there, you could set up subjects, you can delete subjects, you could delete early learning goals, you could create new objectives, you can delete objectives, you can get it tailored exactly how you need it. So another option, as a sort of halfway house, some schools have decided not to track against statements for each of these month bands for each of the early learning goals, but rather they've chosen to use the early learning goals themselves as a sort of statement. So they're making assessments. So we've got here making a kind of a judgment for each child against each of the 17 early learning goals. Now, obviously, this is a lot more broad now. So rather than having 30, 40, 50 statements for each of the 17 early learning goals, now I just have 17 early learning goals. And it works in the same way. So you're essentially saying whether they are on track to meet that early learning goal or on track to exceed it at any particular point in time. So that's going to give you a good reference about whether children are on track to meet GLD. Also, as I said, we've got this overall summative judgment that we can make. Now, this can be in a lot of different formats. Development matters bands are still very popular, and we could choose to use that here. So we can choose to make that judgment, or as I've already done here, you might want to do something more bespoke, something that you've decided on. So these are kind of age-related bands, whether the child is working well below age-related, just below, working at age-related, working above age-related. You can have as many bands, as few bands as you like, and you can change the language. So I've got well below, just below, secure and greater depth, and that really applies to sort of year 1 to 6, but working well below, working just below, working at age-related and working above might be appropriate. So you can do that. You also have foundation stage profiles, so we could have emerging, expected or exceeding, and you might, whilst that would normally be used at the end of reception year, you could perhaps use it throughout the reception year if you wanted to, essentially saying that they're on track to be emerging, on track to be expected or exceeding. So you can use month bands, you can use foundation stage profile, emerging, expected or exceeding, or you can create your own. It's entirely up to you. So as many or as few learning objectives as you like, or no learning objectives at all, or and just have an overall summative judgment up here in whatever format you choose. Now, if you're not tracking against learning objectives, you don't need to use these tracking grids if you just want to make that overall summative judgment. So if I click on Enter Data up here and click on Assessments, and I choose my reception year, and I choose an early learning goal, and I choose what format I want the data to be in. So I'll choose Development Matters here, and I choose Load Up My Grid. As you see, I've already got data in here, but I can do it that way. So I can do it that way rather than from the objective grids, and I could create my own if I wanted to, EYFS bands, and I choose a different format and load up this grid. And now I can choose those age-related bands if I want. So again, entirely up to you. So now we've got some data in, we can start to get some data out. And we've got various reporting options under the cohorts menu. Now, these first three are tables, and you can literally build your own. Now, I've already done some videos on this, so I won't go into this today, but they're completely bespoke. You can build a table, drop columns into place to show whatever data you like. But the ones that I want to show you today are just these three: overviews of attainment, overviews of progress, and the progress matrix. So we'll start with the overview of attainment because it's really simple. Now, by default, I've already got reception selected, and we'll end up with a little bar chart for each of the early learning goals. So for each of the early learning goals, based on those overall summative judgments I've made for those children's attainment at that point in time, it will show the proportion of children that are working well below, just below, and above, either based on your age-related band or your development matters band or whatever format it is that you're using. Now, I've got more options than this. Obviously, I can change the year, and I can change the term, and I can change the data type. But I can also do things like change the subjects, select 3 subjects, and if I do that and scroll down, by selecting 3 subjects, it will then create a Venn diagram. So I've got the proportion of children that are on track in all 3 of those, or 2 of those, or what have you. I don't just have to stick to those academic aspects, I can choose other aspects as well, and it will do the same job. And there we go. Right, all of these reports are interactive, so if I just quickly click on the name there, I get down to a pupil page. It shows their assessment over time. and it shows their progress over time up through those development matters bands. You can make comments. The attendance will come in from your MIS system. You can make comments, add attachments and what have you, and assign them into intervention groups as well. So you can create your own intervention groups. Just go back to that report. I can group this. So choose a group. There we go, boys against girls, and I could change that to disadvantaged. And there's even a key group option, which will create all of those groups, those main groups that we might be interested in. So this report's got a lot of flexibility, and it's a very quick way of finding those children who are where you expect them to be or not. The next report I want to show you is the overview of progress. Just get rid of that, and we need a start point and we need an end point. So if I choose entry, so I've got an on entry assessment and then a summer assessment, and depending on what type of data you're storing in this system, you're going to need to put a progress rate in here. Now, if you're using point-in-time assessment, where you're stating children are working securely at any particular point in time, the expected progress will just be 0. You just put a nominal 0. But here I'm using development matters bands, and my expected rate of progress is 3. Now, this is something that a lot of schools are doing, is popular, so we'll stick with that for now. I'll put in 3. And I get a report like that, which shows the number of children, the portion of children that have made 3 points, those who've made less than that, and those who've made more than that. If that's if it should be 4, then there we go. That's now showing the portion of children that have made 4, less than 4, and more than 4. As I say, if you were using point-in-time assessment model, then you just put 0 in here, but that doesn't apply to the sort of data that I've got in here. There's development matter steps that I've got in here at the moment. And again, you can just tick the particular subjects that you're interested in. Right, the last one to show you is the progress matrix. So the progress matrix works in a similar way. We need a subject, and we need to select the year, leave that as the current academic year, and we need the terms that we're interested in. And I'll leave this as main assessment, but it might be a different type of data that you choose to use, but usually be using your main assessment. You can mix and match. It could go from your ongoing teacher assessment to the final foundation stage profile result, but we'll just stick with this for now. And what this does is it shows children's progress from the start to the end of the year. So children who are age related at the beginning of the year will be in the green row, and those that are slightly below will be in the orange, and well below in the red, and above there will be a blue row if there was any. And these children here in this row, in this intersection here, are children that were age related and still age related. So that's all fine, not particularly concerned about them. These look good, that they've gone forwards, they've caught up. This child has gone even further. I've got some children here who've made good progress, but these are my main concern group. This is a group of children who have fallen behind a bit, and that might be our focus. And these reports are really useful and justifiably very popular because unlike the other reports which are just dealing with sort of aggregated data, here we're actually looking at individual pupils, and we're looking at individual pupils from start points to where they currently are, and that's really informative, particularly for pupil progress meetings. So that's the pupil progress matrix. And I hope that gives you an idea of the system, what it can do, what sort of data it can store, and the various formats that we can store in here, the reporting tools that we have. Insight's a great system. It's really, really flexible. It's really, really powerful, and it works just as well for foundation stage data as it does for the other year groups. Okay, I'll do another video again soon, but until then, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.